Hey guys, this is Maregaal here, Cove, and welcome to today's video. The video will start in a minute with a whole different background, but anyway, this video is talking about a conversation I had this weekend in Canton, Texas with a Christian guy regarding why Jewish people as a whole do not believe Jesus is the Messiah. And not just that, but he does not even qualify as a prophet. And so anyway, and I also talk about discrepancies of the New Testament that you will find interesting, and why Paul was even considered a apostate in his day. So please stay tuned, hit the like and subscribe button, and thank you for watching. Here we go. Now on a side note, if you don't want to look at my ugly face, just put on your headphones and listen to this video. Alright, let's go. Hey guys, this is Maregaal, Cove. Today is February 6th on a Tuesday, 2024. Today I want to talk about a unique situation that happened, and this in Canton, Texas. I was at an art show in Canton. It's actually I was in the first Monday trade days, and that is like, I think, the biggest outdoor/indoor flea market in the whole U.S. and possibly the very oldest. I mean, it goes over 100 years old. Anyway, I was set up in two spots. I got two spots for myself to show my artwork. I'm a stone artist by trade, where I take natural rock and chisel them out by hand. And sometimes I will carve, and sometimes I will forge copper to make copper jewelry and things like that. So I'll horse around with copper. And so anyway, as I was set up in my little spot, there was nobody there. It's like 4 days long, Thursday through Sunday. So Thursday, nobody was next to me. And of all the vendors that were there for February, which is usually typically a lame month, but I had a very good month for February, so I was quite happy. Anyway, there's no one there on Thursday. And Friday, some people showed up, and like I went to go to the restroom in the middle of the night, and there was like a table there, like at 1 a.m. in the morning. I'm like, so I was wondering if it was the old vendor, or the vendor that was there the previous month, which was an 18-year-old lady selling her particular art there. Anyway, but there's a political book there on the table. I'm like, that wouldn't seem like her, because she is more in the crafts, not politics, so I kind of just wrote it off. Anyway, when Friday came around, these people showed up. And so blah, blah, blah. And they were just kind of minding to themselves. And eventually, as I was just sitting there, like how I am now, sitting on the same chair as I am now, you could hear this dude talking about spiritual stuff, spiritual warfare. And in case you don't know, in case you're wondering what this whole video is about, before I even delve into it, because I'm already delving into the story. Anyway, this is about Jewish apologetics versus the Christian New Testament, and why Jewish people do not believe as a whole Jesus is the Mashiach or Christ. Okay, so this is going to be an educational thing. Hopefully all of them are educational, but this one will give you hopefully an eye-opener. And this was apparently an eye-opener to this dude here who I talked to. So anyway, this guy was like, had a big old beard, you know, older, kind of grayish, he had long hair, you know, overweight and stuff. So he was talking about spiritual warfare with this dude, with this girl, I mean, and this lady, and she was just kind of seemed to me, and she was just sucking it all in, just getting fed her info by this dude. So eventually, you know, a lady came forward, you know, came over and liked my artwork, and we talked a little bit about what they're doing about this constitutional stuff, your rights under the Constitution, and blah blah blah. Probably in 2 hours go by. Well, this guy eventually comes over, and he says about the same thing. In fact, most everybody in that whole booth, there's like 5 of them, everybody came over and wanted to talk to me about politics and stuff, and blah blah blah. Anyway, I wasn't really interested in that, and kind of curious what they were, kind of curious what they were promoting, but I thought it was a waste of time for them to be at this show where they might get 2 or 3 people interested versus just putting it on the internet. Anyway, like YouTube, you know, short or something. Anyway, eventually this dude, just out of the blue, he just wanted to start witnessing to me. He goes, so what do you think about, I don't know why he even conjured up if there was a lead up, like, because I had a Mogan David, a Jewish star there as far as one of my carvings, but I don't think he went to the front to go see it versus just come in between the rows. I had rock over here, and then a section where you could walk between the rocks, and so I don't think he personally saw the Mogan David, Star David. Anyway, he goes, just out of the blue, he goes, well, what do you think about Jesus? Okay, what brought all this on? He's just being he got to preach the word and convert everybody, you know, to believe in his hoorah, you know, and for salvation for my lost soul. And I don't know if the lady before said anything. I don't know if I even mentioned anything before. But anyway, and I saw, he goes, well, what do you think about Jesus? Just out of the blue. And I was like, well, I said, I said, I'm Jewish. I said, I study the New Testament every single day, you know, and I said I was an ex-Orthodox, biblical Orthodox, that is, Jewish guy. For like 25 years, I was this way, and I said, he's not the Messiah at all. I said, but I didn't say it like that right at the beginning, you know, he's not the Messiah. I said that like very shortly after that, a few seconds after, but I said, well, I said, what did I say? I think he was this is kind of how I word it. I think he was, well, in fact, I know he is a 1st century biblical Orthodox Jewish dude, you know, kind of biblical, but he was an apocalyptic Jew, meaning he thought the time of the end was right at the door. And so I said, but for me, so I believe he was Torah observant, 1st century Torah observant, and among 1st century Judaism. And he was apocalyptic, but as far as him being the Mashiach, the Messiah, the foretold Messiah, see how the background changed? Anyway, that was interesting. Anyway, no, he is not the Mashiach. He failed miserably in every single way. I said, so he's just like, what? I said, I don't say that as just a dude who's just in denial or something. I said, there are reasons, strict, hardcore reasons, why he is not the Mashiach or Messiah, according to the Jewish text. Okay? Now, a lot of people, Christian folks, are just so fed, and I'm not telling them this, they're so fed, they think for some reason they have all these goofy ideas. They throw context out in the trash and don't use common sense, or they are ignorant of the biblical text and ignorant of the New Testament as a whole. Okay? And so I said the Messiah of Judaism of the Old Testament is said he must be a certain type of person. Okay? There is no all this hoorah. I said, however, a lot of Christians, what they'll do is they'll take the New Testament and take it for granted that they think it's telling them the truth of what the Messiah must be like, and so they take the interpretations or the views and the New Testament Messiah and apply it on the Jewish scriptures. And then they'll say to Jewish people, why didn't you see it? You know, Jesus is the Messiah. He's everywhere in Jewish scriptures. I'm like, no, he wasn't. I said the Jewish Messiah is mentioned, the belief in the Jewish Messiah and the doctrine of the Messiah in the biblical text, the Old Testament, because that gotta remember, that was the only scriptures in Jesus' time is the Old Testament. Now, granted, those who want to give me backlash, we all know that there were no one book with Genesis through Malachi. That didn't exist. There's all separate scrolls, okay? But in all these scrolls, the Messiah is a certain person. I said the New Testament does not promote that person at all. And so let me explain. I said the Jewish Messiah must be a genuine son of David and King Solomon through a natural way, through a sexual union down the line. Because David had many kids, but precisely he must be the son of Solomon. Solomon had many kids. He also must be all the kids of the kings. He must be a descendant of the kings as well. And it might be through Hezekiah or Josiah, but blah, blah, blah. So he must be from the physical loins of King David and Solomon, okay? And the whole point of him, when he comes, he's kind of like Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus the Great, and Alexander, but better. He takes over the whole entire globe, and when he comes, his kingdom shall be a theocratic monarchy. It's not like American Constitution and our great bliss we have here, okay? And I kind of threw this out there. Just maybe for shock value. I said a lot of people will frown on Islam, and all their harsh ways and this and that. Because a lot of Westerners know more about the strictness of Islam versus the strictness of Jewish Orthodoxy. I'm not talking about rabbinic. I'm just talking the biblical text. And so I said on top of this somewhere in the conversation, I said, if they think Islam is strict, just wait until the Jewish Mashiach comes. Because it'll be far, far more stricter than Islam by far. Okay? Now, why is that? So I'm going to say it for this video. Why? Because according to the biblical text, the Mashiach is not only like a militant military leader, where he conquers the whole earth, but his kingdom is a theocratic monarchy. So he becomes king, ruler of the whole earth, but the law, the very law, like in America, we go by the Constitution and Bill of Rights and all these other laws, okay? And so, anyway, the law of his kingdom is what? The Torah. And what is the Torah? The Torah is the laws that El himself, according to the myth, the legend, and the superstition, that El himself gave to Moses on Mount Sinai. Now, a lot of people who don't know this think there's only 10 commandments. No, not at all. You've got to go back and read the text. Stop believing on the street preachers, okay? The story is El, the God of Israel, spoke 10 sayings, not 10 commandments, 10 sayings, okay? The first statement is, I am, it says Yehovah there, okay, YHWH. I am Yehovah who brought you out of the land of Egypt. That's it, point blank, that's the first statement, okay? What Christian Bibles will do, they splice the second one and add some of the second one to the first, so it's now 10 commandments. So where the reality is, it's 10 sayings, 9 commandments, okay? Anyway, when he got done with like the 10th way the story goes, if you just read it, the people were like, oh my God, El is talking with us face to face. We hear his voice and see the, hear the light, see the lightnings and hear the thunderings and blah, blah, blah. They were scared big time. And so they told Moses to go up to the mountain and get the rest of those commandments. Okay. Well, the rest of the commandments is the Torah. There's over 600 commandments, okay? If you were to count them, there's actually, go through Genesis, through Deuteronomy, there's over like 920. When you dwindle them down, like get rid of the repetitious ones, because like the 10 sayings are located 2 times, in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, and then you could see them again in a different type of format, like in a little bit anyway. And Leviticus 19, you can see like Sabbath, this and this, no other gods and things. So if you get rid of the repetitious ones, it dwindles it down to slightly above 600, supposedly. Now, I myself never dwindled it down. I just wrote them all out back in the day, and it was well over 900. So anyway, what the Mashiach does when he comes, the law of his kingdom is the Torah itself. These vast law, 600 plus commandments. What we got, that's where we start off with, okay? And so in this conversation, I say, somewhere down the line, I'm going down different rabbit holes all at the same time, so I'm just trying to stay focused. And so I want to talk about Paul right here and what he taught, and then I'll veer off into James for a minute. But so, according to the Jewish scriptures, he is a genuine son of David, okay, and of Solomon. And he is a military leader. And he conquers the whole earth, and at some point, he becomes king. Or he becomes king first, then takes over, whatever the case might be. It's not that specific in the Jewish scriptures, okay? So, but his monarchy is a theocratic monarchy, and the law of his kingdom, the statutes or penal code, or whatever you want to call it, the law, like the code of Hammurabi, the code of the Jewish Mashiach shall be the law of El that El gave unto Moses on Mount Sinai. That is the foundation law. And because there's some stuff that's not in there and time goes on and you need more stuff like no abortion. There's nothing mentioned in the Torah about female having sex with another female, lesbianism. That's not in there. Homosexuality of a man and a man, or a man with an animal, or a woman with an animal, but not woman on woman. So things like that. So, or arson, that's not in there. There's nothing in high detail about new moons in the Torah. You have to find it in Amos and Nehemiah and things like that, okay? But, so the Torah will be like the base law of his kingdom. And according to the Jewish text, scriptures, I should say, he never, ever, ever dies. Once he comes, once he's monarch, that's it. He's king, period. He never dies anywhere. There's no foretold prophecy of him ever dying. Ever. But anyway, before he even brings it up, I said, well, a lot of Christians will say, what do you do about Isaiah 53? You know, if he never dies. I said, have you read Isaiah 53 at all in its contents at all? I said the context is chapter 40 through 66. This is not the genuine Isaiah the prophet who lived in Hezekiah's time around 730, 740 BCE. This is a Babylonian dude. We don't know his name. His writings were simply inserted into the book of Isaiah. Okay? So he's in Babylon. And these chapters, 40 through 66, are speaking of 4 servant songs. The servant in there is not the Messiah. The servant is Israel / Jacob. Jacob was renamed Israel, as you might know if you know Genesis at all. But anyway, what Isaiah 53 is talking about is not talking about a dying Messiah, not a dying king, not a dying, son of David, none of that. What it's referring to is the Judeans who are in Babylonian captivity returning home. Because if you remember, they were, according to the biblical text anyway, they were thrown into captivity because of their sin, and the exile is what purged their sin. They paid the price for their sin through the exile. So after a certain amount of time, they will be returning home to Judah, and Jerusalem will be rebuilt again, and Jerusalem will be happy again, or / Zion. So that is what that is referring to. And so therefore I said Isaiah 53 is out of the picture. It has nothing to do with the death of the Messiah. These words are not in there. Messiah is not in there. King is not in there. Son of David is not in there. Son of Jesse, for that matter, is not in there. Nor Emmanuel. That's not in there. It simply says servant. And if you go to the previous chapter, the servant is Israel / Jacob. Okay? The Jews. So that's all that's referring to. Now, Bibles like the King James, they will taint Isaiah 53, where words that are plural within the text, they will change it to reflect a single type, make it into more single versus plural. And so you can't do that because the text is talking about a group of people, the Judeans, okay, returning home after their Babylonian activity. So I'm like telling him, so the Messiah doesn't die, he just comes. I said, the New Testament, I said, anybody who reads the New Testament all the way through, there's several doctrines, depending on what book you want to promote. The Gospel of John, I said this to him. I said, the Gospel of Matthew, let me go back to Matthew. Gospel of Matthew promotes, you are not saved by grace. In fact, that author counters Paul. Now, I got back up, just in case you don't know, okay? Paul himself did not have the Gospels. Why? Because Paul dies somewhere around 62, okay? Well, the Gospels were written after his death and after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD by Titus, General Titus. So what Matthew teaches is not that you are saved by grace, but you are actually saved the Jewish way. And what is the Jewish way to be saved? According to the biblical text, not the New Testament, because Matthew is promoting the salvation method according to the Old Testament method. And what is that method? It is, you must obey the Torah. In order to be righteous, you have to obey the Torah, God's laws. Say, for example, okay, I've just used secular terms. This is why I said to him, you cannot be a pro basketball player if you know nothing about the game the moment you step on the court. No one's going to expect you to be NBA quality when you know nothing of the game, okay? So, the walk of holiness and Torah observance is the same way. You start out down here, and hopefully, you're going to be like a graph, and you're going to be up. You're going to go up and up and up. So, holiness is a process. And so, you have to be holy and righteous in order to have life in the age to come. That is the biblical doctrine of the Old Testament. That is constantly why the God of Israel, constantly sent prophets among the people and saying, basically, lack of better words, repent and turn. Okay? We're just going to be destroyed. That's basically the whole entire message. So the Torah is the law, and all the other books are basically, I can't say all of them, of course, but I mean, many of the other books and the prophets are telling you to go back to the law itself and be holy and be righteous and upright. Do the right thing. And these are the ways how to do the right thing. These 600 tells you what types of foods, tells you uncleanness, disease and plague, normal living, business affairs, sexual stuff. I didn't say that already. But anyway, this is what Matthew teaches. Now, I'll give you an example. I mean, there's several examples in Matthew, okay? And like I said, Paul did not have the Gospels because they were written after Paul, okay? And so, but I'll give you an example. But now I'm going to add this in there because it's needed right here. The 4 Gospels, now this might blow you away. The 4 Gospels were written by 4 Gentiles that never knew Jesus, never met him, never heard him, okay? They wrote their Gospels afterwards. And let me add this into the conversation, okay? The genuine Jesus of history and his disciples spoke Aramaic. They might have spoke a little bit of Hebrew, because they're Jewish, but Aramaic at the time was the main language of the populace. Why? Okay? The reason why is during the time of Cyrus, when we went to Babylon captivity, then Cyrus took over. He made Aramaic basically the language of his official language or trading language of the kingdom, and so Aramaic became common among the Jewish populace, okay? And so where the learned people could do both, Hebrew and Aramaic. Now they're sister languages, so if you were to write it out, you see SLM for shalom with no vowels, and so you can say, okay, that's shalom, so one could be spelled like shalom, and the other one would be salam or salem, things like that. And so it'd be slight differences, but the main consonants are the same typically. And so, what was I going to say? So here's an example of Matthew, and this is what I'm telling the guy. Matthew's gospel promotes a Jewish theology. Not all of it. I mean, there's a lot of Gentile pagan stuff in there, and some things were added in there, okay? And I'll point those out. So, I believe it's Matthew 19, okay? A rich lad, comes up to Jesus and says, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life, or life in the age to come, or, life, basically?" And so Jesus corrects him. And this is interesting for those who believe Jesus is God, because it throws it right in the face. Now I'm going to throw this in there as part of the rabbit trail. In Paul's day, the people did not believe Jesus was God. Didn't believe that. Like, there was no Trinity yet. That whole belief came later by the Gentiles, okay? So, Jesus says in Matthew 19, now pay attention to what I'm about to tell you, because when you go to a church, a lot of the church preachers will tell you many of the insignificant things of the story that has nothing to do with his blunt, point-blank answer. Okay? So what does Jesus say to this rich kid? If you want to enter into life, obey. Now let me back up. Okay, let me back up because I need to say it all. He goes, good teacher, what must I do to inherit life, or life in the age to come, or whatever? He says, why do you call me good? There is no one good but God alone. However, if you want to enter into life, obey the commandments. That was his answer right there. He never said, believe in me. Didn't say any of that. None of that. Okay? He says, if you want to enter into life, obey the commandments. That's it. You have to be holy and righteous and set apart. If you're not holy, he doesn't want anything to do with you. Okay? Because the point of the Messiah, the true Jewish Messiah, yes, if he is a king and the Torah is the law of his kingdom, he's going to be a Torah type scholar, knowing the laws, okay? Just has to. So, in order to rule by law, and he is the ruler, the main head of his kingdom. There's not like a vice president and all the senators and all that. He is king. He has to know these laws, okay, in and out. Kind of like Solomon, he ruled and by the laws of his kingdom, okay? So, but what else does Jesus say in this? He says, why do you call me good? There's no one good but God alone. Okay, so right there, for those who believe Jesus is God, he just denied he was God. Because if you're going to say, oh, well, then he deceived somebody. If he was God, he just deceived somebody right there. Because he just says, why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. He didn't say he was God there. He outright denied he was God there. He says, if you want to have eternal life, obey the commandments. So, and I pointed out to this guy, if you go to Matthew 7, Jesus, now this is where the author, because like I said, the author of Matthew is writing after the death of Paul. This is like 40 years later. You always have to keep that in mind. That's the context. Who is this author? He is a Gentile, Torah-observant dude, but he's still kind of tainted to a point. Okay, because he's kind of brainwashed because of Paul to a certain degree and all these influences. But so he's countering Paul in this phrase here. Okay, and he puts it in there. So he goes. So Jesus says in Matthew 7, he goes. I think it's around 29. I could be totally wrong, but it's Matthew 7, might be verse 21, somewhere right around there. He says, not everybody who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom, basically, our kingdom of God. And then they'll say, did we not, do miracles in your name, cast out demons in your name, and do works of wonder in your name? Blah, blah, blah. And what does he say? He says, depart from me, workers of iniquity. Okay? Well, guess what? That word right there, iniquity, in Greek, if I know how to say it correctly, is anomia. And what does anomia mean? It means, and in the context of Matthew, got to remember the context, it means those who are without the law, whether or not they are ignorant of it altogether, are in outright rebellion of it. That's what it means. Workers of lawlessness. That's what it means. So the author of Matthew is telling you Jesus will condemn you regardless, because he's talking to believers. Did not we do this in your name, prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name? I think that's what it was, prophesy. And blah, blah, blah. And he doesn't care. He doesn't care because they are believers and they do all this stuff, and he casts them to outer darkness because they are workers of iniquity. That is what this book promotes. Okay? Now, I'm talking to this guy. I said, because if you remember earlier, I said the Jewish Messiah must be conceived naturally through a sexual union. I said, now Matthew was tainted very early on, the book that is. Not Matthew himself, whoever this Gentile author is. Okay? Why is that? I said, if you look in the whatever chapters there are, 1 through 3 or whatever it is, Matthew, it gives a whole virgin birth account, and it gives a whole different story and whole virgin birth narrative than the Gospel of Luke. Totally radically different. However, and I told him this, I said, however, most Christians are ignorant because they never read. There's a fifth gospel out there, a homemade one by preachers, because they have this new theology that the Bible is in there, there's no flaws, that whole theology is practically pretty dang new in Christian history, okay? Early on, they already knew that there's flaws all over the place, okay? Even Origen knows this, and he lived around 200. Excuse the background flickering. There's no flickering lights. It's just the camera trying to figure stuff out. Anyway, so in Matthew, the Holy Spirit comes upon Mary, and she gets pregnant through the Holy Spirit, blah, blah, blah. And this is according to Isaiah, according to the prophet Isaiah, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like telling him this, and I said, have you even read Isaiah 7 at all? It has nothing to do with the Messiah at all. Nothing whatsoever, okay? And I said it totally contradicts Luke's account. And so, I'm going to tell you a little truthful tidbit about Matthew's account and why it got there in the first place, okay? Originally, it was not part of Matthew, but it was added for a certain reason. And why was it added? Okay, I'll tell you, hopefully. Well, I should probably say it now before I forget, because it's hard doing a video and remember all these things going through your head. So, I'm trying to remember what I said to this guy, because he's kind of like floored by what I'm telling him. So I said, according to Paul, Romans chapter 5 through 7, when Adam and Eve ate of that fruit, as you know the story, their eyes were opened and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, excuse me, I had to take a break real quick. Anyway, Isaiah 7 has nothing to do with a virgin giving birth to a Messiah. It's just not there. What the whole chapter is about around the year 740 BCE, the king of Judah, his name was Ahaz, and he was worried at his time frame because the king of Israel, the guy in the north, and the king of Aram, or Syria, depending what English translation you got. Anyway, they kind of joined forces and wanted to conquer Judah, the kingdom of Judah. And Ahaz, the king of Judah, was totally worried. Totally super worried over it. Well, El, the God of heaven and earth, told Isaiah, go down and meet Ahaz, okay, and give him, reassurance that I will be with him. And so Isaiah basically says that to him. He says, I'm paraphrasing for our video here, but he's basically saying, don't worry about them, because I, El, will be with you and not with them. And in order for you to believe me, I'm going to give you a sign that my wife, because apparently it's Isaiah's wife, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. So Isaiah says, I will be with you. And so the girl is not virgin. The Hebrew word for virgin is betula, okay? The Hebrew word there is alma. It just means young girl. It doesn't mean virgin at all. Now, it can mean virgin, but the girl is Isaiah's wife. And so the girl's child will be called Emmanuel. Now, that's just young women get pregnant all the time, so that's not exactly a sign at all. But here's the sign, though. If you just keep reading. Before the child knows right from wrong, the two kings that you are worried about, the king of Israel and king of Aram, they will be dead. So what is this telling you? And the child's name, Emmanuel, means El, you hear the L in there. El will be with you. You being the kingdom of Judah. Okay? Not that God will be born from a virgin. That's not a twofold prophecy. It has nothing to do with the Messiah. It's talking about something relevant right then and there. Okay? So Isaiah is telling them, within 3 or 4 years, the two kings you are worried about shall be dead, because I am going to be with you, king of Judah and people of Judea. Okay? That's what that is referring to. Okay? So, blah, blah, blah. Now, go back to the New Testament. So that is a false prophecy, false reading. Okay? False reading of the text, whoever put that in there. And why did they put that in there? Okay, this is where I have to go back to Paul. I don't know what I just said before. But in Romans chapter 5, chapter 5 through 7, Paul is talking about this. Now, it wasn't called this at the time, but it became called this, the original sin. And this is referring to when Adam and Eve, this is Paul's doctrine. That's not biblical. We don't teach this. This is pure, invented by Paul and Paul himself, okay? Paul taught that when Adam and Eve sinned and ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they got sin upon them because of that, or they sinned, this somehow in Paul's mind created a sinful nature. Okay, and so now this sinful nature is passed down to all of Adam's descendants, all of them. Okay, so we're all sinners automatically upon birth. That is according to Paul's doctrine. That is not what the Jewish scriptures teach. So Paul's teaching something totally radically different that's not biblical at all. What do the biblical scriptures actually teach? So when Adam and Eve sinned by disobeying, by eating of this fruit, whatever it was, what's it say in there? I don't know what verse it is, but it's in chapter 3. It says, it's on the latter part of chapter 3. And it says, El himself clothed them with garments of skin. Okay. Do you grasp what I'm saying here? So the tradition is there was a sin offering made. And the skin from that sin offering was what made atonement for them. However, the big however is the consequences to their sins still applied. They were banned from the garden. and they got all these particular curses, okay? And so, but there was no sin that was passed down, because if you're going to claim that this sinful nature is now passed down, then you would have to also say the sinful nature existed long before they sinned, so-called sinned. How is that? Because before they actually, the law was, you cannot eat that fruit. Okay? That's all it says. Cannot eat of it. And say, they're put in the garden to maintain the garden. And say you can't touch it. Now, Eve put in there, you must not touch it. For some reason, that's in there for some reason. I don't know why it's in there. Either she had, you got to remember that the law was given to Adam and Eve didn't exist yet. Okay, so you could eat of all the fruit of the garden except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That was only told to Adam. Now, Adam might have said something different when Eve was made. Don't even touch it. He might have said that for security purposes, or she just may have forgotten, just put it in there. Don't know nothing. It's not in the text, okay? However, the moment she longed for it, coveted it, is the moment she sinned. If you're going to use the doctrine of who El is. If he tells you something not to do it, and all of a sudden you're thinking, I'm going to do it, you're sinning already before you even do it. The moment you think that, you're already sinning. Okay? So Paul is just wrong all the way around. But anyway, Adam and Eve was clothed by El himself with garments of skin. And so the tradition is that skin came from a sin offering. And so they were atoned for. And even though they were atoned for, they still got the consequence from it. Okay? But now going back to Paul, these Gentile people who believe in Paul added the virgin birth to the Matthew account. But why did they do that? Because Paul taught that a sinful nature was passed down to all of Adam and Eve's descendants, all of them. Well, guess what? If Jesus was conceived naturally through sex, that made him a sinner as well. Well, oh my God, how can that be? Well, I don't know if Paul realized what he was writing, because he wrote something in the exact same book, quite contradictory in his own book of Romans. Because he's promoting this in Romans 5 through 7, but in chapter 1, verse 3, he says Jesus is of the seed of David according to the flesh. So what does that mean? Seed right there in Greek is sperma, where we get the word sperm from. So Paul is telling you that Jesus is a direct descendant of King David in a natural process. Son to son, son to son, son to son, son to son. And here comes Jesus. That's what he teaches. Yet over here, he's teaching that anybody who comes from Adam and Eve have a sinful nature. So he probably didn't realize what he just said. However, I've got to say this to Paul's credit. Even though I hate Paul, I'll be honest, I hate him. He's worthless to me. I mean, he was known as an apostate in his day for a reason for these types of beliefs. Anyway, Paul was the earliest. You gotta remember, Paul, now you gotta understand something. Paul lived like right at this time frame. Now, he was around when Jesus died, but he didn't know Jesus. In fact, this is a very important thing to point out. If you read all his so-called letters, and maybe even the debated Hebrew letter, to the Hebrews, there is not one single quote of Jesus in all these letters. Of Jesus. He doesn't care about anything that Jesus says, because he is promoting his own belief, his own doctrine of what his death resulted in. Okay? He was off on his own. And so if you know Paul, he taught that when Jesus died, like, okay, he obeyed the law, but when he died, his death on the cross, he became a sin offering. And in his body was basically the law itself, okay? And he nailed it to the cross, according to Ephesians, okay? He nailed it to the cross, and so he died to the law, the life under the law. He died and resurrected a new person, okay? So now we are saved by grace and not the works of the law, okay? So that was Paul's doctrine. That is why Paul himself, even though he claimed to be a Pharisee, it's really hard for me to wrap my head around that, because all the doctrines he taught are so anti-Pharisaic, anti-Jewish. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's really bad. And so he says in Philippians chapter 3, how he turned his back on the law, considers it now dung, and you are now saved by grace, by the blunt work what Jesus did. Okay, so Jesus was an offering, and because he resurrected, you have a new demeanor about you, a new spirit about you, if you believe and walk after the things of the Spirit, whatever that might mean. Okay, we all know what it means if you follow Paul, but in reality, it's a different story, because anyway, blah, blah, blah. So, going back to the virgin birth, this is why it was added, because but the author, whoever this Gentile author who added this text within Matthew, he screwed up royally, several reasons. And he actually, to go down the rabbit hole, he actually steals a genuine story of history and makes it a part of Jesus' life when it had nothing to do with Jesus. Okay? So what goes on is, what he does, he makes Jesus, this author, virgin born. He's so far Greek, it's pathetic. So, okay, here's Zeus. He sees some mortal chick, and has a baby with this mortal chick, and so this son is like a demigod, whatever. And so this is what's going on in this added text. Even in Luke, it says, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, so that he shall be called the Son of God. No. That is so Greek, it's pathetic. That is not Jewish at all, okay? Just not Jewish. God does not see some virgin chick who's never been slept with, even though she's, betrothed by Joseph. You don't care, who cares? No respect. Yeah, I'm God, I can do what I want. And I'm just gonna impregnate this chick and have my baby. So it's so Greek, it's literally so pathetic, it's ridiculous. So anyway, so now whoever this Greek author is who put that in there, yes, now he's so Pauline too, so he voids the Pauline doctrine of Adam's sin is passed down. So now he's okay, so he doesn't have the seed of Adam, because he doesn't come from Adam, he comes from God himself. Okay, so he voids the seed of Adam. Great. Okay, great. He's flawless. But guess what? At the same time, because this is how stupid, I'm going to call it how it is, how stupid this guy is. Whoever this author is, you just killed the whole prophecy. If he is the Jewish Messiah, it says point blank, he must be the physical offspring of King David and Solomon. However, how far down the line it might be. Grandson, great-grandson, great-great-grandson, however how far along it might go. He must be a direct descendant of King David on the father's side. That's the only time it counts. Not through the female side. Now, I know there's people watching. Mary, why, a son of, a daughter, a descendant of David. Where do you get that? Luke? Seriously, Luke? Nowhere in the New Testament does it say ever anywhere. It's in church, pagan church tradition. Mary's a descendant of David. No. Who cares what church tradition says? Because they just make the stuff up like anything else. Okay? Luke says point blank, Jesus is the son of Joseph. Joseph is the son of so-and-so. It's telling you Joseph's line. And it's a completely different genealogy than Matthew. And Matthew is a point blank Joseph line as well. Okay? So, what I was going to say is, when you avoid the sinful nature of Paul by making him into conceived, he was born from a virgin girl, you just deleted the whole prophecy. He must be a descendant of King David by natural means. So you just shot yourself in the foot. However, like I said, that whole section was added. And now I'm going to go back to where the story, some of the story was stolen from. Okay? In the year 66, and slightly before this, but we want to focus on the year 66. You got to remember, the Gospel of Matthew was written after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. Okay? But this add-on was added on by a Gentile author who didn't know Jesus. And he also don't know a lot of other stuff. So it's interesting. These little add-ons tells you who these authors are. Okay? But let me finish what I'm about to say. So I'm telling this dude in Texas all this. And he's just like looking it up. And he's like, what? Never heard all this stuff. And it's like, because you don't study, you're fed. There's a difference when you're fed a bunch of junk from a church and you get on fire. Oh, Jesus is my Lord and Savior. Oh, I gotta go out and witness. You better be making sure what you're doing, because you're wasting your time and you don't know stuff, because you're gonna bump into somebody like me who does know his stuff. Okay? Anyway, what is stolen is, there's a guy who lived in the, around year 66 AD, CE, whatever you want to use, don't matter. A guy named Tiridates the first. He was of, what do you call it? He was an Armenian, okay? He was an Armenian, but he was also a Zoroastrian priest all at the same time. Well, Zoroastrian priests are called magi, okay? And so what happened was, he became king of the Armenians, and he learned along the way that Rome was not too pleased the people made him king of the Armenians. So eventually he put his crown down. Ooh, I ain't messing with Rome. Okay. And so eventually, in the year 66, he wanted to do it the right way. So he was headed to Rome. So he came from the east. Okay. Him and his other buddies, who were also priests, magi. And so you're headed to Rome, not Israel or Bethlehem to go see this so-called king born of a virgin. No, not at all. That was added and twisted, okay? Twisted to make the story flow or sound good. So in year 66, Tiridates headed west to Rome to be appointed king by the emperor Nero, someone highly greater than him. Well, guess what? You could look this up in your science books if you want. I'm telling you the truth. In the exact same year, the rare comet was flying over. And what comet is this? Halley's Comet. Of course, it wasn't named Halley's Comet yet, but it's footnoted in the history books. In year 66, Halley's Comet was flying over. And this is the exact same year when Tiridates, a magi, a Zoroastrian priest, headed west to be appointed king. So this Gentile author hears all this, either twisted it on purpose to make it fit the Jesus timeline. And so the Magi, during this Star of Bethlehem, blah, 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 and puts it way back in the past during the time of Herod. Okay? So he takes a true story and adds it to Jesus' life when that never happened. Okay? And here's another contradiction, just to point it out. Because like I said, a lot of Christians do not study. Okay? And what is this contradiction? Besides the virgin birth, Luke has a virgin birth account, but it totally contradicts Matthew. According to Matthew, they are residents of Bethlehem. They have a house there in Bethlehem. They don't come from Nazareth at all. Okay, no census and things like that. What Christians will do, they'll make their own gospel up out of the blue and marry the two stories and bingle it up, and you got a brand new story that neither of the authors even say. Okay? So Matthew says the Magi came to Bethlehem, to the house, not a manger in some farm. Came to a house and blah, 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 presented gifts or whatever. You go to Jerusalem first, and during the days of Herod, and so Herod the king is alive, and so then they find out is supposed to be born in Bethlehem, which is a twisting of the scriptures. It doesn't say born in Bethlehem in Micah at all. It just says his descendants are from Bethlehem. It's talking about Jesse there. Jesse and Boaz and so forth. That's all that's referring to. It doesn't say in that text that the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem. It doesn't say that. That's a total invention. Okay. Anyway, so the Magi come to Bethlehem because of dreams, blah, blah, blah. A lot of dreams going on. And so Joseph and the family goes down to Egypt. Out of Egypt I call my son. According to the scriptures, total tainted text like the Isaiah 7 verse 14 that's talking about Israel there. Out of Egypt I've called my son. It's not talking about Messiah, it's talking about Israel. It's deliberate distortions on purpose. So anyway, they come back going back to Israel, after Herod dies. I'll tell you the contradiction in a minute. So after Herod dies, they go up to Nazareth. So he's called a Nazarene. There's no prophecy stating that the Messiah will be called a Nazarene. It doesn't exist. It's not there. So anyway, according to Matthew, he is born, gotta remember, Herod killed, in the virgin birth narrative, he kills all the kids 2 years old and younger. Okay, so Herod dies in 4 BC, so Jesus apparently is born between 6 BC and 4 BC. Well, if you go to Luke, when he gets baptized, Jesus is baptized, it goes like this, the lead up. It says, now the word of the Lord came unto John in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Well, Tiberius started in 14 CE. Add the 15, that's year 29, so it's 29. Then sometime right after that, Jesus is baptized. Okay? And then it goes, and Jesus was around 30 years old. Well, there's your contradiction. 30 years old would put you around 1 BCE. Yet it says in Matthew, he was born during the days of Herod, which is before 4 BCE. So you have all these contradictions. So the virgin birth of Matthew and Luke were added. So anyway, I'm talking to this guy. He's just kind of flabbergasted. So I told him all these things. He's just like, dang, dude. You know, I don't consider myself smart by any means, but he's complimenting me. I see that you're well versed in the scriptures. I'm like, yeah. I said, because if some dude's going to come up to a Jewish guy and say, Jesus is the Messiah, and that Jewish guy does not look into it simply because his rabbi says Jesus is not the Messiah, he would be pretty stupid to believe his rabbi without looking into it. You be prudent to always look into it if it's the case. But like I said, the Jewish Messiah, according to the Jewish scriptures, like I said, the New Testament claims all their info is coming from the Old Testament. But if you look at the Old Testament says that the Jewish Messiah must be a direct descendant of King David and Solomon, and he never dies. And his kingdom shall be a theocratic kingdom. The law of his kingdom shall be the Torah itself. So here's this clown named Paul. Christianity follows Paul. Okay? Does not follow Jesus at all. Period. If you were to follow, like say, if you were, like all you had is the Gospel of Matthew minus the virgin birth account. Every Jesus follower, not a Christian, every Jesus follower would be Torah observant. There would be no thought of a new covenant, no thought of dying for your sin, no thought of a virgin birth that was added because of Paul's writings. None of that. Okay? What you get today is all this bickering and fighting, you know, about you're saved by grace, not of works, lest any man should boast. It's a mental, philosophical game. You have to convince some clown on the street that you're a sinner. God made a law, no one could do it, even though Elijah did it and all these other people did it. And I did it. It's really easy to do. It's not that hard. Elijah did. They don't even think of Elijah. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's so impossible. Then how did Elijah go to heaven? Hello? Why did these people get all these covenants made? So obviously it's easy to do. It's not that hard. It's training. Just, it's a lifestyle, dude. It's just not like I said about the basketball thing earlier on. You can't just throw someone on the card who's going to be an NBA guy. Okay? It takes time. But if it's a culture, it's a lot easy as a culture, okay? It's really easy. So, it just takes training, disciplining, things like that. But anyway, Christianity follows the doctrine of Paul, okay? So you play this philosophical game with people. Here's this guy on the street. You try to persuade him. He's a sinner. God has a standard. And it's impossible to do, and so now you have to repent. However, over here, there was a dude who died for you. So now you have to, so you just persuaded you're a sinner. Can't do it. He doesn't tell you to do it at all. He just says, okay, now you're just left all alone as a sinner. However, there's a dude over here who died for you. So you get into this superstition of ancient people of sacrifices and lambs and goats and bulls, and how the God up there smells the sacrifice and he's pleased by it. Okay? And Jesus, he died for you. Really? So a God who's all-knowing just can't say, okay, you changed. You changed. You disciplined yourself and got rid of all you used to be a, this type of person. You changed. Yeah, he don't forgive you. You have to believe this dude died for you. And so now you just have to believe in him and stop doing a little bit of things, because Paul only gives about 20 in particular. I'm just paraphrasing, but, rounding things off, about 20 laws, and that's about it, A lot of them have to deal with sex, but no fornication, no homosexuality, bestiality. Of course, you can't gossip, and blah, blah, blah. So, you see what I'm saying? It's just philosophical to a point, to a point. But yeah. So I'm like telling him, look, but another main thing why Jesus is not the Mashiach and a false prophet, if he actually said these things, which I don't believe at all, because the authors and Jesus was an apocalyptic type Jew. Which meaning they believe that the Messiah was right at the door at any time. If you go, I want to wrap this up. If you go to, and I say this time and time and time again on my shorts, because I want to conjure it up and make people think. That's the whole point. That they're believing BS. And if you read down the comments, it's quite amazing to read the homemade apologetics right off the cuff. Oh, because they can't accept the truth that's literally in front of them. In Matthew 16, I'm going to paraphrase this. I'm not going to quote it. Go get the book and quote it. Anyway, in Matthew 16, verse 27 and 28, Jesus tells you the time brackets of when he will return. Okay? He tells you when he will return. Now, if you read later in Matthew, it says no one knows the day or the hour. Only the Father knows. But he gives you the brackets of the time frame. Okay? So what are those brackets? It goes like this. Excuse the noise. He says, I'm seriously paraphrasing here because I'm just drawing a blank by doing the video and sitting here for an hour already. Anyway, he goes, basically, not everyone standing here, I'm really paraphrasing. I hate paraphrasing. I wish I could remember verse 27 correctly. But anyway, maybe I should just push pause. I'll push pause. Hold on. All right, I got it. Let's read it. This is a King James Bible. And King James is a little bit better than a lot of them. I mean, it sucks overall, but, but because it has like a lot of tainted stuff in there, like the translators deliberately are trying to push an agenda. But anyway, Matthew 16, verse 27 and 28, this is what it says, all right? It says, "For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels," that is the Father's angels, "and then he shall reward every man according to his works." Sounds like judgment to me, right? Okay. "Verily I say unto you," now listen to this very closely, because this is the brackets, because in verse 27, it does not give you any time frame. Okay? It's just kind of like an out there prophecy. That's all that says. I'll read it again. I'll read it again. You'll see no brackets in there. It says, "For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with the Father's angels, and then he shall reward," that is Jesus, that is, because he is claiming to be the Messiah, at least in this passage. Whoever wrote it, whoever this Gentile author is, he's a Torah-observant Gentile author. Okay, we got that. Okay. And you might ask me in the comments, and I'll explain to you, why do you think he's a Gentile, not Matthew? It's very clear, if you just read it, Anyway, let's read on. Anyway, it says, with the Father's angels, paraphrase, and then he shall reward every man according to his works. That tells you the Messiah is the judge, so he has to be Torah observant. Okay? That kind of goes with the Old Testament, who the Mashiach is. That's fine. That's fine. Now, the coming part, that's not in there. That's not in the Jewish scriptures. Okay? Anyway, regardless of that, here's the brackets. Now, listen to it. Remember, I gotta say this, I so gotta emphasize it, I really do, because a lot of people, if you read the comments of my shorts, it's so pathetically bad. I mean, it's so bad, because they can't deal with it. They cannot deal with it. Now, let's read it, okay? And it says, verily, I say unto you. Okay, who is the you here? It's not future tense, It's talking about right then and there, the people who are in front of them. It's his disciples who are right there standing in front of them. Whether it's all 12 or it's like 3 of them, doesn't matter. Could be 100 standing there. I don't know. It doesn't say, doesn't specify, okay? It says, verily I say unto you, there be some standing here, right there in front of him. Those people is he talking to. Can you tell I'm a little, excited or something? Adamant, be a proper word. Verily I say unto you, there be some standing here. That is a plural. The word some is plural, not one, because there's some of you that teach, John is still alive. Oh my God, some of the comments on my shorts, John is still alive. That is how brainwashed some of these guys are. Oh my God. So, verily I say unto you, there be some standing here. That's plural, okay? Which shall not taste death, okay? That means they're not going to die. Okay? They will not die. That's some, not one, some. 2 or more. That's all it means. 2 or more. That we're standing there in front of them. So that kind of gives you a bracket. How old are these guys? How long will they live? Average lifespan, 70, 80 years. That's a bracket. That's a bracket. Get my point? So it goes like this. Which shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom, or with his kingdom. Did that happen? Ask yourself. Now, I'm telling this dude in Texas this. Did that happen? So this is just to round it off, okay? If he dies in year 33, whatever, between year 30 and 33. And he's telling, let's just say the whole generation he's talking to. Let's just do a pretend, a big pretend. Let's say everybody on the globe is standing there in front of them. And he says, not all of you will die before I return. Even if someone was born that very day and could miraculously understand, the most would be around 100 years old. So from 30 AD to 130 AD is the bracket of his return. He didn't return. Okay? It is a false prophecy. So, he is either a false prophet or the author totally invented the prophecy. Okay? And there's evidence he invented a whole bunch of junk. Why? Like I said earlier, they are apocalyptic believers. They believe the end was about to come at any moment. Now I'm going to go right back to Paul and end this video, okay? Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, he tells people to remain single, not to get married. Why? Why does he do that? There was a reason, because Paul, even though I hate Paul. I mean, he's vile. He was known as, he's known as I'm going to say this in after a minute. But, yeah, he was known as a apostate for a reason, okay? Anyway, go back. I don't want to lose my train of thought. I'm sorry. I always get animate about certain things, and they need to be said. But anyway, Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, just read it. Don't take my word for it. But he is an apocalyptic Jewish guy. You know, he's off on his own tangent and all this and promoting his own philosophy and malarkey that's not backed up by Scripture. And you can see he's tainting the Scripture. He tells people not to marry. Why? Because he says in there, the time is short. Did you just get that? Paul taught it was so short of a time of his return that you don't even really have time to get married and have a family. Okay? That's what he's promoting. That's how tight it is. So he was like almost thinking within like less than 6 years almost. Because why wouldn't you just go ahead and get married and be with a wife? Because Paul is trying to promote, stop focusing on your carnal desires to be with a woman sexually. Man to a man, whoever females are there, or your lust toward your man or a guy you like, is telling you not to lust carnally after the things of the flesh, but focus on Jesus. Because the time is so short. There's really no time for any of that. We gotta grow. We gotta do this. We gotta do that. He said, be like me. He was single. Okay? Pitiful. That's how tight the time frame was in Paul's eyes. So, Gospel of Matthew is a false prophecy. The whole book. Got to be thrown out. If Jesus said it, Matthew 16, excuse me for a minute, if Jesus said this stuff in Matthew 16, then he is a false teacher and a false prophet. Okay? Another thing, it has nothing to do with Messiah. Just keep it as a prophet aspect. Who cares about the Messiah? He's totally, I mean, it's totally clear he's not the Messiah. He's dead, he's gone, he's not here. Okay? He died, he was crucified, he's defeated. There is no prophecy anywhere in all the Jewish scriptures that the Messiah dies. Isaiah 53, like I said, has nothing to do with the dying Messiah. It is talking about the Judeans coming out of Babylonian captivity after a period of time. That is what that's talking about. Okay? I mean, you really have to wrap your head around this. Out of all the New Testament scriptures, Isaiah 53 is barely even talked about. I mean, something that would be so important. Why don't they talk about it? You know, it's just like on the road to Emmaus, I think it's Luke, when the two so-called disciples are going to Emmaus and Jesus appears before them. Okay? Blah, blah, blah. And Jesus asks, what are you discussing among yourselves? And, oh, haven't you heard? Blah, blah, blah. And what does it say there? It says, Jesus starting with Moses, then with the prophets, told these guys all what the prophets and the law foretold concerning the Messiah. Yet amazingly enough, in every single incident, every single time that the New Testament claims those types of verses, this was fulfilled, blah, blah, blah. He broke it all down. Jesus broke it all down, starting with Moses and the prophets, or like Paul says something, or so-and-so says something. There's nothing mentioned. There's nothing mentioned. Not one single peep. Nothing. Because it's never said. It's invented. It's fake. Jesus is not the Messiah. And even on the most liberalist of terms, if you were to use Matthew 16, he's not even a prophet. Okay? He was an end-time, apocalyptic, first-century Jewish preacher. Orthodox preacher. Okay? That's all he was. Okay? And for some reason, they believed he was the hope of Israel, yet according to all the Christian manuscripts, he never lifted a finger against Rome. Not one time. Not one time. The only wrath or anger you see him really getting his heat under the collar is when he flipped the tables in the temple. That's it. It wasn't against Rome. So, that is not the Jewish Messiah. The closest Jewish Messiah we had as a people. I'm going to wrap it up right here because we're approaching 90 minutes. The closest Jewish Messiah Judaism has ever had was Bar Kokhba in the year 132. Why? Why? Why him? Why him? Well, people, we have his historical books that show the rabbis, some rabbis, not all of them, of course, some rabbis deemed him as the Messiah. But why? But why? Why did they do that? They didn't do this with Jesus. Philosophers and end-time so-called prophets and teachers don't count as the Messiah. Bar Kokhba was a genuine son of David like Jesus was. There's many of them. Even the guy who made the oral law written down, Judah HaNisi, he was a son of David too. But he didn't go out and try to conquer. Okay? He just wrote down the oral laws. Bar Kokhba was son of David. He conquered the Romans, thrust them back, took Jerusalem back. He had plans to rebuild the temple, yet then he got defeated himself. Okay, but he was a son of David as well. But he was fulfilling the more authentic prophecies of who the Jewish Messiah must be like. Jesus didn't do any of that. Okay? Again, to wrap this up, the Jewish Messiah must be conceived in a natural way, conquer the whole earth, promotes the Torah, and the Torah shall be the law of his kingdom. So it is totally 100% absurd for a clown who claims to be the Pharisee, claims to be a Pharisee, to teach that Jesus is the Messiah, yet he did away with the Torah. It's ridiculous. It's pathetic. Okay? Christianity is a farce. It's a 100% farce. That's it. All right. End of story. Have a good day. Hit the like button and subscribe button. And anyway, how this conversation was, about this long, is how long I talked to that guy for. And he was kind of appreciated it. But anyway, Talk to you guys later. There's so much I could talk to you about. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'll try to answer and try to keep my emotions down much as I can. No, but I gotta admit, some of the comments, man, the apologetics that come through trying to whiplash me is just kind of absurd and just kind of irritating. But I'll deal with it. Anyway, love you guys. Thanks for watching. And like I said, if you have any comments, questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Shalom to you. And love you guys. Thanks. Hit the like and subscribe button.